Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining us this afternoon, we have Josh Lospinoso. He is the co-founder and CEO of Shift5, as well as Rohit Sethi. He's CEO of Security Compass. We're here to discuss modernizing and rethinking U.S. defense innovation, improving risk management, and where the capital is flowing. It is great to have the both of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks, and certainly a critical conversation to have, Josh. Let's kick this off and make us aware of the critical blind spots in the operational technology security that national and commercial organizations need to address.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having us. So one of the intuitions for folks that know a lot about cybersecurity in the IT business domain is the assets that make the world go round, aircraft, maritime vessels, space systems. They're very slow to depreciate. We field them, they're very expensive, and we use them for decades. So you'll have aircraft that were manufactured in the 60s, 70s, 80s that will continue to serve for the next, couple decades. And because these are safety critical assets, they carry people and goods. We test the heck out of them before they get fielded with the electronics that are available at the time. And that makes it extremely difficult to upgrade their sort of digital landscape internally as we're using them, which, kind of solidifies them in a way. And they're, a little bit like being encased in amber, if you will. And so it's hard for security professionals and operators to make an impact on those systems from a digital perspective, even though it might be relatively straightforward to do something like swapping an engine out. So that's the intuition. And that's a playground for, attackers, obviously, is when you have ancient technology. I mean, no CISO of any size company would say it's okay to run a computer with Windows 95 on it, but we have, firmware that was written many decades before Windows 95 hit the shelves.
Yeah. Rohit, let's talk about this concept of asymmetry in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, the basic concept is that there's asymmetry between the attackers and defenders in cybersecurity. And really that comes down to the complexity of defending systems. So if you think about your average organization that has endpoint devices, computers, mobile devices, they have to lock those down. They have to make sure that, they're not susceptible to malware. They have to train employees, make sure they don't click on phishing links, but they also have to lock down the network infrastructure, the cloud systems, the applications that they write. There's a lot that has to happen. And so it's very expensive. When you think about it from the perspective of an attacker, you can have a single person or a small group of people be very effective without all of that spend, right? And so that's really what the asymmetry comes down to, is you just don't need as much effort or cost to be successful in attacking when you compare that to the cost of defense.
Yeah. Oh, and Rohit, of course, we have to insert AI into this conversation. How is that changing the nature of cyber attacks, especially regarding the scale and sophistication of them?
Well, pretty significantly. If you think about it, in order to successfully attack defense systems, let's say, the bar is high, right? You have to have a lot of expertise. You have to have a high level of knowledge. And, that was maybe a limiting factor up until recently. There just weren't enough experts to, go crazy with attacks all over. They exist. There are nation state backed actors who break into systems, but with AI, you just don't need the same level of expertise. You can leverage AI to do a lot of things for you automatically. And basically, what that does effectively is it makes this asymmetry worse. Attackers just don't need as much time, they don't need as much expertise to be successful. And that makes the impetus on defenders even higher.
Yeah. And Josh, you were mentioning before, it's like trying to run complex systems off of Windows 95. Let's discuss some of the biggest obstacles to rapid AI adoption within large bureaucratic organizations such as the Pentagon and contractors, DoD, and so forth.
For sure. I think there are, cultural, structural, and technology problems, So on the cultural side, I have experienced, I spent about 15 years in uniform. I've experienced a profound transformation of the way that senior leaders are talking about these problems. So I'm very encouraged by that. The structural problems, we actually saw quite a bit of disruption recently in defense acquisition reform, not just in the Army kind of blowing up their program executive office structure and solidifying that into six with different kinds of acquisition pathways. but also allowing people that are making decisions about what to procure to decide what the appropriate acquisition pathway is. I mean, this isn't to say that somehow we designed a crazy system that didn't make any sense from first principles. I mean, we set this up after World War II because, private industry doesn't make submarines. They don't make, nuclear powered ships. And so it made sense in that time, but now we're in a different context. And to be able to apply things where actually the commercial industry is on the lead foot on a lot of these matters, we're seeing that in a big way. The final thing, though, is structural. And so, I think on the business side, relatively speaking, like IT infrastructure, the DoD, or the Department of War, has really become much better at procuring than it was even a decade ago. There are profound structural challenges when it comes to the assets that make the military, coupled with its people, the most powerful military on the planet. And it gets to that same question that you put, the thread that you pulled around. Why is it so difficult to secure these assets? Well, it's two sides of the same coin. For us to put the kinds of storage, compute, instrumentation, observability, communication infrastructure out to the tactical edge on something like a tank or an aircraft, you're talking fundamentally about making modifications of some variety to these legacy systems, and then creating standards for the new acquisitions to ensure that those things will be flexible and durable for many decades to come. So those are three big topics, but all very significant challenges to the speed of adoption.
Yeah, so it sounds like, Rohit, it's not just necessarily the technology itself, it's just the structure and the way that, the talent and the technology is procured. So what role do you think industry leaders could play in driving innovation and cultural changes within the, defense industrial base?
Well, I mean, to Josh's point, I think the good news is there's a lot of encouraging signs that things are changing, and that people are open to what's happening in industry, innovation that's happening in industry. And so I think it's up to industry to make sure that we take advantage of the ability to work closer with with the government. And one thing that I might add about this whole complexity issue, just to think through, is that we might think of Department of War as like a single entity or single organization, but the fact is that it's many different organizations, and even within them, there's different leadership, and then you have the defense industrial base, the contractors, and they're all large organizations as well. So I think each group really we have to work with and make sure that we are introducing some of the innovation that you're seeing in industry, including things like how you can equip the defense defenders with the innovations that we're seeing in AI, which it can be difficult for people to accept because they're worried about the risks that are associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point that you make, and Josh, I think it also helps to lend to the legitimacy of involving private capital, whether you're thinking about it in terms of public-private partnerships and complementing government R&D and bringing in academia and its R&D capabilities as well in order to secure these new technologies. Because, with your 15 years of service, and thank you for your service, by the way, the playing field has evolved rapidly.
Very much. Yeah. I mean, there's some like kind of historical irony or interest here. Sand Hill was built on the defense industrial base in the 60s. It's on the edge of Stanford, and Stanford was, the recipient of a lot of government funding around some fundamental technologies. And I think venture capital, for a variety of reasons, not right or wrong, kind of stayed away from defense for quite a while. Move fast, break things, a lot of consumer tech, things of that nature. And in some sense has been rediscovering its roots in defense-oriented mission. And you've got some really interesting structures these days. So the SBA, as an example, has done tremendous work in directly funding a lot of earlier stage or sort of tech transfer types of projects. You've got programs from Office of Strategic Capital to increase leverage for defense-oriented firms. You have a tremendous amount of venture capital flowing into defense. Something like 40% increase from 2001 to 2023. And I think that money managers are realizing that this is a really interesting asset class to augment their portfolios. It's anti-cyclical, it's sticky, it's durable, it's driven by geopolitical uncertainty, and a lot of these technologies are also dual use. And so I think we're in a very interesting time. I'm really encouraged to see not just the capital flowing, but some of the best and brightest people on the planet deciding that this is a worthy mission that they want to contribute to. And it's great to see folks in machine learning deciding that rather than increasing click-through rates of 3% on an ad network, they want to go and figure out how do we make our our aircraft more secure that are defending the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point that you make, because if we do want to maintain our leadership in innovation and national security, making sure that we have the right skill sets there. And I think perhaps people are unaware of just how technology plays into defense spending and the defense complex as it is. I believe, what is it, 500,000 cybersecurity jobs are open and necessary to be filled. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah,
hugely. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's definitely the case. And one thing to remember is that increasingly software is playing a big role, right? So even when we're talking about the machines that are used in the military, they're all embedded with software, and so it's true that there's cybersecurity and in general software development, and so just making sure that the systems that we're building, we're treating security seriously. And so both the security professionals as well as all those people involved in the software development process, bringing security in to the forefront to make sure that the systems that they are using in the field, are truly ready for combat.
Yeah. And let's talk. I'm sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just vehemently agreeing and also saying one of the really interesting aspects of this operational technology space, which we've kind of been weaving into a little bit, is all of the cybersecurity concerns are, as acute as on the IT side, and perhaps even more so because you're talking about cyber physical systems that when they're compromised, it's not, hey, we had a bunch of data stolen or we had to shut down operations maybe because our systems aren't working. This is aircraft with control systems that are operating control surfaces, or water treatment facilities, or manufacturing assembly lines that that can be compromised in catastrophic ways. Stuxnet is a great example of ostensibly a government-sponsored attack against a centrifuge, and we saw what happened there. Also, though, the good news is that these very same systems, because they are adjacent to operations, they are making aircraft fly or space systems operate, is that the very same investments that we make in improving that technology gives us an opportunity to actually, in the case of a business, make a positive impact on P&L, increase capabilities, increase longevity of the revenue generating assets of a business, or in the case of the DoD, increasing mission capability rates, right? We've got trillions of dollars of these assets, many of which have very poor mission capability rates. I don't want to call any particular programs out, but you can look this up in public record. And if we can move the needle on that, that's tremendous cost savings and improvement of capability. So these things come hand in hand to Rohit's point. They're software defined and they are applications of the same kinds of rejuvenation or innovation that we want to do on those systems.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a bit for a moment, Josh, and put some context around this. What are some of the solutions that Shift 5 is providing?
Sure. Yeah. We focus on digital modernization of these aging systems. So what we build is observability infrastructure that is applicable to any of the 100+ military weapon systems, commercial aircraft, maritime vessels, locomotives, with this idea that, like I said, these systems were manufactured many decades ago. And we, with a relatively cost-effective and non-intrusive makeover on these systems, installing modern storage and compute and AI capabilities directly at the edge, listening to the digital data that these systems are generating, we can fast forward these systems in a safe way from the 70s, 80s, 90s into 2025, where we have all these incredibly powerful software-defined capabilities. Yeah. So you can think of us like horizontal infrastructure for the world's most important transportation systems.
Yeah, and Rohit, I'll ask the same question of you as well. Security Compass and the solutions that it's providing, because it sounds to me that sustainability in terms of long-termism and adaptability to a dynamic environment really is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like Josh, we're involved with the digitization of, these programs, and we work both with military as well as civilian. And so, where we help people is in the software development process. And, the way we look at it is that if the systems that you're building are secure by design, then by the time they're deployed out in the field, they're much less likely to be susceptible to the attacks that we hear about in the news. And so effectively, we help integrate security to the very beginning of the development process. We help people understand what they need to do to make systems secure, but do it in a really streamlined way so that it's not encumbering the software development teams. And I think that's a key point, is that there's a lot of overhead, generally speaking, with processes like the authority to operate in most cases. So that's making sure that when you build a system, it's following all of 500 pages of best practices, and going through that can be quite cumbersome to the point that is detrimental to innovation. And so we help people streamline that process and make sure that they can do it in a much more agile sort of way, so that they can get systems out faster while still making sure that they're secure and compliant.
Yeah, I would imagine that's the balance that's the hardest to achieve, Rohit, where you have, even if you think about it in a civilian case where there was this rush to get internal and external AI applications out, and, was the risk assessment known at the time? And are we starting to see those vulnerabilities and gaps now, and then being able to adapt to that and, think about security, privacy first moving forward?
Yeah, and in fact, Josh brought up OT, and I think there's a really good precedent from incidents like Stuxnet, where the industrial controls manufacturers in the civilian space came up with the standard, the ISA secure standard. And this is a voluntary standard that you don't have to do, but that an organization can show that they've integrated security into their development process, and they can put it on a website that everybody can see, and it becomes a trust mark, right? The people who buy these systems can tell, oh, this manufacturer, is ISA secure. And so they've essentially taken the right kinds of guidance and made sure that they've implemented the appropriate combination of people, process, technology to have secure systems that they ship out to customers. That just gives that customer a lot more assurance. And I think you can take some of those ideals and put them in domains like defense.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's a competitive advantage at this point. So Josh, to wrap up here, I think you had made a great point before that it's just not one particular department. There's so many agencies and so many stakeholders here, right? Is there success in terms of getting that buy-in in order to advance from where we are right now and be able to invest in this space?
Massively. Yeah, I think, defense is such an interesting space because it is a monopsony buyer, right? Like, there is a single budget and a single buyer at some level. But I think actually, Rohit had mentioned this, you have every service is different. The domains that they operate in are different. Their requirements of what kind of warfighting functions that they serve is different. And then even within those branches, you have this kind of strange setup where your buyer and your user are different. The program offices that are procuring, they have a very difficult job, but procuring a new aircraft or responsible for maintaining, an old ground vehicle, they have an unending list of requirements and a finite budget with which to start tackling those priorities. And then the users are deployed around the world using these systems and giving some feedback that it oftentimes doesn't align. So the program offices have an incredibly difficult job. And your job, depending on the nature of your product or service, your job is to figure out how do you align all of these stakeholders, from Congress to senior Department of War executives to the program offices to the users, and they all have different cultures and priorities. So this is a very high, like, business development kind of like sales oriented market to execute in, which feels quite different from even selling into Fortune 500 companies as an example. But we see really like amazing people, great Americans that are serving in these roles, trying to do what's right, and dealing with a lot of pressure to get it right. And when you explain these different kinds of concepts of like, look, you're having mission capability rates, 4 out of 5 of your aircraft can't do their mission, or you had something happen and you're not sure whether it was a cybersecurity or a maintenance issue, and that's a game, a game over type of an event for you. When you show that you are credible and trustworthy and that you can solve these problems and you're patient with them and you can, go through this sort of incremental process of proving a technology out, getting through ATO, doing a limited deployment. The mission matters first and foremost. Like, you don't do this if you don't care about the mission. But I have a fundamental belief, and obviously a lot of venture capital dollars have the fundamental belief that you can do well and do good, and you can build incredible, durable, important businesses on the way to accomplishing a really important mission.
All right. Appreciate both of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.